You're listening to the Art Said podcast, Season 2, Episode number 22, Lessons We've Learned This Year 2.0. Welcome to the Art Said podcast, conversations through the perspective of the arts and education, hosted by educators and artists Shauna Longo and Edric DeBose. Hey, Edric, how you doing today?
I'm good.
Awesome. So I can't believe we are at episode 22 and we have our second season in the books.
There we go.
When we hit end recording on this episode.
Who knew we'd get this far?
Who'd have thunk it? So listen, we like to end each season with kind of a recap and some overarching wisdom and thoughts that we have to kind of bring things together. And I think some thoughts and ideas that can't be said enough, can't be said too often, that are really important for arts educators to kind of keep in mind and really digest and put into practice. So that's what we're hoping to do today.
With some kind of an eye towards the future, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think you've always got to be looking towards the future. So when you're talking about looking towards the future, our first nugget of knowledge, how's that? That's a nice little alliterative phrase. One thing that's prevalent in our society right now is uncertainty. That can't say it enough. And so, but I feel like there's always some level of uncertainty in education. Mm-hmm. There's that pendulum that's always shifting. What's the new trend? What's the new, alphabet soup, as I call it, of education. Mm-hmm. And so what I've found very effective in giving myself a sense of consistency amongst that uncertainty is to have a plan, to have goals. And so it's one of the activities I do every year to kick off the year with the teachers that I supervise. And so what are we working towards? And if you can make those goals, I've been doing it the past 2 years because I've been new to this position. We did our year goals. I'm going to shift for next year. What are our 5-year goals? Because I found that in the beginning, we had some very specific my first year goals, but then it's okay, we did a lot of work towards this. Now we just need to keep it up. We need to continue. And so that's when you have to step back and think kind of longer term, bigger time span of 5-year plan. And I think I've always done that. No, I know I've always done that my entire career. It's been okay. And I always made it purposefully to let my administrators know what that plan was. When I walked into a new teaching position, okay, what do I have? You make an assessment. All right, I'm teaching these courses. Okay, when are they up for curriculum revision? Okay, here's how I'd like to if you can make changes, or you want to add courses, or you want to create something new, if you have that opportunity, you need to show them a plan over time, and not I want to scrap all 5 of these courses I teach and create all these new ones. Not going to happen, nor can one person scrap and recreate 5 brand new courses to start all in 1 year. You have to pace yourself to be able to effectively roll them out and be tweaking and revising and figuring out what the kids need. And once you the way I always approached it was one at a time. Get one good, then start thinking about the next one and kind of layer in. So when you're think about, use the summer to reflect. And what's your 5-year plan? Personally, professionally, within your building, there's different layers to plan and goals, but what are you working towards? And if you can align that to your district strategic plan or goals or district goals, whatever it might be, you will 100% get more buy-in and support from your administration if it's aligned to that bigger district plan. And you can align almost anything to anything in education, because it all comes back to meeting the needs of the students.
Well, you talk about making goals. The word I love to use for this is narrative. It's always what's the story you're telling and who's it for? And then can you get the story that you're telling yourself in terms of why you do what you do? Can get that story to match the narrative of the district? Because the district tends to be going somewhere. there's
Yeah.
so it's like, well, find out what the environment is, what it is you have to offer, what it is you're trying to bring, find out, where the district sits, and then try to put your story within that story. So, but it's always narrative to me. It's like, who's doing
Yeah.
what story is being told here? And
And
who
you may have to reframe the way you approach it or the way you pitch it to align with it, but you'll know that deep down, here's your purpose. You're just reframing it into their talk, their language, their focus.
Right, because usually the district has a particular problem they're looking at. They
Oh, yeah, they are.
set
No
up.
one's even the best districts have things they're working on.
So if your conversation doesn't connect to that problem, they're really probably not hearing you.
Absolutely. And listen, you can't be so focused on yourself to not realize that. Like, it's not about you all the time.
Right.
The next topic, which kind of like stems off of this, is you need to be proactive and communicate that 5-year plan and give updates, like have an action plan about how you're going to accomplish those goals, like how. And I'm not, guys, listen, I'm not saying you got to make this formalized plan, but you got to show that you've actually thought this through. And with AI will do it for you. Give it some ideas. It'll give you a beautiful action plan about how to get from here to there. You no longer are alone in creating these. And I think some people are either really, really good at communicating what they're doing. And I think social media has made that even easier. And then there's a lot of people who are like, I don't want to brag and boast. But if you focus on your students, it's not bragging and boasting. It's communicating. It's sharing and spreading the good word about the amazing things that are happening within your classroom, that you are making happen. So I think that we have to be consistently communicating the amazing things. And communicating doesn't mean you got to run and shout it from the rooftops. It could mean you do a social media post. It could mean you send out a press release. It could mean you just hang up a bulletin board, and that's the way you communicate. It doesn't have to be this big grandiose production, but you need to be consistently doing something. I used to do a newsletter when I taught pre-K to 1 that I'd have sent out via the main office, would just blast it out in an email to all the parents. And it was just like a 1-pager or 2-pager. And it's like, here's what we've been working on in music in kindergarten this month, with just some songs and like talking points for the parents so they can engage their kids and learn more about what we're doing, which then helps spread the great word about.
Something else you said earlier, that we were talking about was this idea of being proactive as opposed to reactionary, because when you're reactionary, you're fighting an uphill battle. So
Absolutely.
I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I call it reactionary advocacy. You need that, right? When times get tough and there's budget cuts or they're cutting positions or whatever they're doing, you have to like enable the troops, but you also have to know how hard you should push to be able to get the positive response. Sometimes if you push too hard, you can have the exact opposite effect of what you're going for. So you also have to like read the room and know. But I think that if you in my career, I found that consistent communication, which to me, communication and the word advocacy are interchangeable, because that's the approach I take. When the going gets tough, you got to amp up. But like, if you aren't constantly on their minds, and if anyone were to come up to an administrator in your district and they asked about your program and that administrator can't immediately think of one positive thing to say about it or respond to it, you're not communicating enough. Like, you have to give them the verbiage, that you have to give them the story to tell that gives that like consistent communication versus reactionary.
Right. It's also,
right?
but I think it also helps them to feel comfortable with what you're suggesting or where
Absolutely.
Because if you don't have a certain level of comfort, then they don't have a certain understanding of where it is you're coming from already, it's more of a fight.
Yeah, and the impact you make, right? I always tell them, like my teachers, like, help me help you. If you're not telling me great stuff that's going on, challenges you're having, like if I'm not informed, I'm in conversations and meetings that if I'm equipped with that knowledge, right, that consistent communication, I can get ahead of things. I can head things off. I can steer things in directions. So the more you can keep your admin in the loop, the better off you're going to be in the long term with that. So, and here's the other thing, we're talking about consistent communication. When you have a problem or an issue, you need to see it as a challenge and provide possible solutions. Don't go in and just start complaining, and here's all that's wrong, and expect them to solve it for you. If you let them solve it for you, it's probably not going to be the solution you want. If you can go in with a challenge and give them some ideas about how you could get over that challenge, they're going to be much more receptive. Listen, we're all swamped and overworked. Help them help you.
I think it also prevents you from becoming frustrated, because even if you do present something and it gets shot down, or doesn't get funded, or it doesn't get the support it needs, at least you'll know the reasons why.
Yeah,
You won't be
absolutely.
just upset about how come things aren't working. You'll have an understanding of what the missing pieces are, and then you can start to talk about what those pieces need to be, and you can kind of keep track of where it's at. I think it prevents you from becoming. I think it's really important for teachers to prevent from becoming, the frustration where you feel like you have no support and nobody really understands what it is you're trying to bring.
Right. And you feel unheard, right? You feel like no one is acknowledging you, what you do, or your feelings. And I think that sometimes, arts educators, the arts are such a personal activity. And I think we take it extra personal, what we do. And I think that sometimes we have to be able to separate a little bit who we are from what we do. I think that it gets very gray a lot of times for a lot of arts educators, because what we do is who we are. I've had people say to me, what would you do if you weren't teaching? And you can't say perform. What would you do not in the arts? And that's a hard question for a lot of arts educators. You'd be like, oh, I'd be creating more art. Oh, I'd be doing more shows. Oh, I'd be dust off my instrument and play more. What if it was something else?
We've never talked about this, and then you just brought it up. So, but as I'm thinking off the top of my head, I'm thinking it would still have to be connection. I think connection is the main thing.
Yeah.
It would still be like, I think the thing that I enjoy doing is having a conversation with somebody, figuring out where they are, and then bring what I am, who I am, to that conversation in a way those two conversations connect. So I think if you weren't performing, you would still be looking for a way of connecting what you're doing from one thing to another thing. And I think that's really what the arts do for me. I mean, again, if you live it, if you experience it, it's definitely what they do. It's like, it's all about how the experience of creating art creates a context for you to reach out into other areas. I think that's at the core of most artists that I know, and most performers. It's really about the connection to the audience, and this conversation about these ideas and experiences and feelings that you want to share.
Absolutely. And it's also like, how do you get people to feel safe enough to just look at the situation without blame and reactionary defensiveness, right? Like, again, that goes to that like personal connection to what we do. Because we get defensive, and that is what it is. But sometimes we have to take that out of the equation to be able to communicate effectively the why, the how, the what.
To talk about some of the earlier episodes, we had an episode with Julian Gomez, and what I appreciated about that conversation was the one statement of, you can't police bias, right? So when you talk about bias, you can, and people becoming defensive, it's really about, if you're just biased towards a certain way of working, you've always done it this way, so if you can get people to ask the question, well, what's actually taking place here? So this idea of the importance of being able to slow down and just observe and take a look. That's one of the conversations that we focused on with a couple of different people. With Derryberry, right? With Sanat Hojra. It was about slowing down to take a look at what's actually going on around you. And if you people into that conversation, then I think it becomes less about a defensiveness. It's like, well, how can we make this work?
Yeah. And I also think you need to be armed with facts and to back your feelings, right? Like, how can you put this into data and facts so you can communicate it? And then it's also, about observation and modification, right? Adjusting, retuning, because the pace of change is only going to increase in our world.
Yeah, which is
it's
hard.
crazy.
it's hard for me to understand that. I look at younger people today. I'm like, nah, I have no idea. I can't. I mean, the pace of change is already too much for me, and I can't. It's not getting slower. It does not seem to be getting slower. So
No.
um, you know, what posture you're going to take, but so that just the only thing I have in my, you know, what do you call it, war chest is that idea that no matter what we're doing, though, it's still going to come back to communicating, um,
Hmm.
collaboration, learning how to work with people, creativity, coming up with new ideas, new solutions, and critical thinking, and breaking things down. And that for me is if you talk about advocating for the arts, um, I think those conversations are the kind you have to have all the time, because I don't know that other people in other fields understand that the arts are really about those things. That they're
Agreed.
Yeah, it really teaches communication, context, nuance. I think all those things are things that, as artists or arts teachers, you're very aware of. I don't know that other people have that awareness. You know.
Well, and that's I've been doing work with my teachers about reframing what do we call courses? Like are is what we're doing and what we're calling them still relevant
Mm,
to students in our society, or do we need to evolve what we're offering because are we really meeting the students' needs and taking a um, very open look, and it can be very difficult at times, like we've always done it this way, yeah, but is it still current? Is this the way we should still do it? Because our kids aren't the same as they were 20 years ago. Like
right.
our world is very different. So you know art for art's sake, yes, but also like we're in a business, folks, where you got to get kids in the seats.
Mhm.
And so, how can we frame our approach to the creative process, to the artistic processes in a way that our students connect with them? I think is really important, and that leads into the like stay current. You've got to evolve with society and constantly evolve your instructional practices, your courses. You need to stay relevant and at the forefront of trends in order to keep our kids engaged in creating. There's all the research out there in the world about how people want kids in the arts. I just heard something like one of the Ivy League schools didn't accept a kid who had a 1500 on an SATs and like a 4.2 GPA or something crazy, like over a 4.0, because all they had were test scores and perfect scores and everything. There was nothing to round that student out. They weren't involved in any arts. They weren't involved in any extracurriculars. And so um, it's something we gotta think about, and how can we capitalize on that, because the research is out there and everybody knows it, but how do we stay relevant?
Well, I think the reframing is important. Yeah. So as you were talking, I was thinking about a million years ago when I was in school. Um, there was this conversation about art history, and so
Yeah.
art began to be in a lot of institutions. It went from being art history to visual culture. Now that makes all the sense in the world now.
Yeah.
Not to be talking about art history and to be talking about visual culture and the way that
Right.
we receive our information, given digital culture and just yeah, social media. So
Right.
that evolution makes sense. But again, how do you reframe these conversations or these practices so that it becomes more obvious what the value is to the student and to education in general?
Absolutely. All right. So moving forward, some things that we need to address. Tech is going to be constantly evolving. Stay on top of it, guys. Play with it. AI is a big piece of that. Nobody knows what AI will become and where that is going and how it's going to change things. But I can tell you, like we're, the practice that you can't avoid it. So you got to figure out what it is and how can you use it within your arts courses to prepare our kids, because listen, we don't know what jobs are going to be out there for them in the future. They don't exist yet, and so this is just a piece of that puzzle. But whatever that work is going to be, it's going to require collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking, and that's what we have to prepare our students for. And the dreaded budget cuts, they're happening everywhere, some places worse than others. I encourage everyone to think typically there's someone out there that has it worse than you. And so, if even in the toughest times, we can focus on the positive as much as possible while being realistic. You have to find a balance between giving kids what they need and deserve and just making it work. So, if there are budget cuts happening and the impact of them They should be seen and felt in some way, shape, or form. You should not just be making it work so no one sees the impact of them, but you need to do that armed with facts. It's not usually personal, so leave your emotions out. You need to make sure they understand the impact of those cuts. They're not choices sometimes, it's just, it has to be done. But you can't do it in a way where you're stomping your feet and taking it personally that they're ruining your life as an educator. They might be, but it's not about you. They're not doing these cuts because of you, probably.
Yeah, which again, as you said
It's
before,
hard. It's personal.
hard not to take it personally.
It's hard, but I'm telling you folks, like, they should feel it a little bit, but you can't, like, you also can't completely, like, throw in the towel and like, you know, throw a temper tantrum, which I've seen people do.
Well, the cliche I like to throw, I like to say with my own kids is, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it.
Yes, 100%.
That's what I appreciate when I first went to school at Syracuse University as a freshman. The first thing the dean of the school said was to address the whole freshman class. The choice you made to study the arts might not be the wisest thing, which I still appreciate. To this day, I still appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because again, you're entering an area where you understand the value and the meaning of it, but other people don't really understand the connections, and you're going to have to draw those ideas out for them in some ways. And again, yeah,
Yeah.
I can't really say more than that. It's like, we're facing tough times. It's going to get more complicated by the time we get into season 2. I'm sure there'll be other things to talk about.
You mean season 3? Come on, season 3.
There we go, season 3.
Season 3.
Yeah, there are things that are hitting us in the face that we're seeing on the horizon now, but it's
coming.
Yep. We can see it coming. Yeah.
All right, everybody, listen, we hope the end of your school year wrapped up nicely and you are, enjoying the start of summer break. Take that time to reflect, take that time to plan, and take that time to, like, rejuvenate and get yourself ready for the next year ahead. We're already planning season 3, so we're very excited, and we will talk to you at the start of next school year.
See you later, folks.
Bye.